Good morning and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this morning for the Lumina Foundation's Historically Black Colleges and Universities Adult Learner Initiative convening. I'm Rashida Lopez Morgan, and I'm a principal consultant with Education First, which is a virtual policy and strategy consulting firm, and I am your MC for this convening. If you haven't already, please do put your name, location, and affiliation in the chat. We want to know who is in the virtual room. I'm especially honored to be the MC for this convening because I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm a former district leader with Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. I'm also a proud Spelman College graduate. My husband was born and raised in North Carolina and is a graduate of North Carolina A&T. And if he and his friends were here, they would yell Aggie Pride right now. With a sister who is a Tennessee State University grad and cousins who are graduates of Howard University, my connection to HBCUs is strong and deep, and I so deeply believe in and have experienced the power of these institutions. Lumina's HBCU Adult Learner Initiative, which you will learn more about shortly, is focused on partnering with 5 HBCUs in North Carolina to implement changes to remove institutional policy barriers and launch new or expand existing efforts to better support Black adult learners. Today's agenda includes a welcome and overview from leaders from the Lumina Foundation, Dr. Danette Howard, Senior Vice President and Chief Policy Officer, and Dr. Jasmine Haynes, Strategy Director for Student Success. After hearing our welcome and overview, you'll then hear from a panel of experts who will talk with us on the topic, Centering Adult Learners at HBCUs, Historical and Contemporary Contributions, which will be moderated by Dr. Crystal Williams, Assistant Professor at University of Alabama. We will then hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. David Wilson, President of Morgan State, who will share insights into the challenges and opportunities with reengaging BIPOC adult learners in higher ed. We'll then wrap up our time together with a panel of experts who will talk with us about HBCUs and key segments of the adult learner population, which will be moderated by Dr. Steve D. Mobley Jr., Assistant Professor at University of Alabama. Now we're going to roll right into our program. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat. You'll also see us drop a few links in the chat throughout the morning. If you need any technical support, please email convenings@luminafoundation.org. Finally, we want to see Twitter light up for this outstanding event, so please be sure to follow us and share on Twitter using the hashtag Lumina HBCUALI. So Dr. Danette Howard and Dr. Jasmine Haywood will provide the welcome and overview, but before they do, I want everyone who attended an HBCU to put your HBCU in the chat. I know those of us who attended HBCUs have so much pride for our institutions and for what they stand for. We know how sacred and special they are, how they have helped shape us and contributed to our success in ways that they are uniquely positioned to do, and we want to celebrate that pride today with each other. We will now hear from Dr. Danette Howard and Dr. Jasmine Haywood for the welcome and overview.
Good morning and welcome to Lumina Foundation's HBCU Adult Learner Convening. My name is Danette Howard and I'm Chief Policy Officer and Senior Vice President at Lumina Foundation. But for the purposes of today's discussion, I'd also like to introduce myself as a proud HBCU graduate and current board member who has an abiding love and appreciation for the history and legacy of excellence, student success, and community that have served as the foundation of our institutions for over 150 years. At Lumina Foundation, our work is focused on increasing learning beyond high school for all and ensuring that more adults hold high-quality post-secondary credentials. This is because we understand the power of education and know that most of the good jobs that are available today and that will be available well into the future will require more than a high school diploma. We recognize, though, that in this country, access to higher education has never been equitable, and that systemic structural barriers have led to unjust and unfair educational attainment outcomes for Black, Latino, and Native American students. That's why we've centered racial equity in our work. At Lumina, Equity First is our pledge across the entire foundation and within each of our departments to use our grant making and operational dollars, our endowment resources, and every opportunity we have to influence others to ensure that more Black and Brown and Indigenous students have the opportunity to thrive. Students like the ones that HBCUs have served since their inception. We define equity and justice in terms of our aspirations, what we're working toward, and what we hope to see in the years ahead. We believe that educational equity will be achieved when educational outcomes cannot be predicted by a person's race or ethnicity, and that justice will be achieved when the systems, policies, processes, and practices that lead to such inequities are eradicated and dismantled. These are ambitious goals, we know. And while we've committed to being an equity first organization, we also know we're not going to get everything right every single time. But we are committed to doing our part to ensure the higher education system becomes more just and serves more students more equitably. The HBCU adult learner work that you'll be delving into later today reflects the evolution of Lumina's commitment to HBCUs. In 2009, we supported HBCUs as a part of the Minority Serving Institutions Models of Success project. In 2014, my team created the HBCU Student Success Project, which supported efforts at Dillard University, Howard University, and Morgan State University. And over the years, we've supported several initiatives at HBCU intermediaries such as UNCF. While the Adult Learner Initiative builds off of our prior work, it also marks a number of important firsts, including the first time that Lumina is concentrating our support for HBCUs in a single state, North Carolina. And also, the first time that our work with HBCUs is focused specifically on supporting the needs of adult students. Given what we know about today's students, including the fact that 37% are over the age of 25, 40% work full time, and nearly a quarter of today's students are parents themselves, this adult focused effort makes perfect sense. It's my hope that this initiative and the learnings that will result from it will serve as an important reminder to everyone that HBCUs are and always have been innovative, first choice institutions that prioritize student success and that are uniquely positioned to inform other types of institutions about how to cultivate affirming campus environments and cultures where all students receive the academic, social, and emotional support they need to thrive and to go out into the world and make a difference. On behalf of my Lumina colleagues, thank you for all you do to support students and to uphold the legacy of greatness of our historically Black colleges and universities. Enjoy today's convening.
Thank you, Danette, and good morning, everyone. My name is Jasmine Haynes. I am a strategy director for student success at Lumina Foundation here in Indianapolis. We are glad that you're here with us for the kickoff to our HBCU Adult Learner Initiative. We have an engaging and exciting morning of sessions planned for you, and we look forward to diving into some conversations. This morning, I'd like to share with you why we are doing this work and also announce the 5 institutions we have awarded grant funding to. So, why HBCUs in North Carolina? There are several data points that we considered as we engaged and built out this work. North Carolina, over the past decade or so, has seen almost a 7% percentage point gain in degree attainment for Black adult learners. In addition to that, North Carolina's degree attainment for Black adults overall is slightly above the national average, which is at 33%. When it comes to HBCUs in the state of North Carolina, there's a large concentration of them. There are 10 HBCUs in North Carolina, which means that North Carolina is home to 13% of the nation's HBCUs. And in addition to that, awards 43% of Black undergraduate degrees in the state. As of now, the state is at 52% overall attainment and is working towards a goal of 66% attainment for adults over the age of 25 by 2030. And we are excited to work alongside them in reaching that goal. So as we embarked out on doing this work and thought about entering into this work, what we did was invite all of the presidents and chancellors of the HBCUs in North Carolina to have a conversation. We wanted to learn about the work that they've been doing, learn about their challenges, and learn about their assets as well. After having those conversations, we used that information to inform the design of our RFI, or request for information, that we released in June of this year. We released that to all 10 HBCUs in North Carolina, and we were excited to see all 10 of them respond and send in proposals. And that really is a testament to their interest in this work and their dedication to serving Black adult learners. Before I get into announcing the 5 institutions that we will be working with, I wanted to share the goals for this work. So you'll see here, the first goal is strengthening essential institutional capacities. There are, particular pieces of infrastructure that institutions need to be able to serve their adult learners. And we are looking forward to working alongside these institutions to build those pieces of infrastructure. The second goal is becoming more inclusive campuses for Black adult learners. We know from research and from our experiences that Black adults have unique needs, and they are not a monolithic group. And so how can we work alongside of these institutions to become more inclusive and serve Black adults in the best way that they know how? We are also excited to really cultivate a community of practice with this cohort of HBCUs. We're looking forward to fostering regional collaboration and really just creating a space where these cohort of institutions can learn from each other and learn with each other. Lastly, the goal for this work is to give credit where credit is due and to shine a light on HBCUs overall, and these 5 HBCUs in particular, some of which have been doing this work serving Black adults for decades. And so we have several things put in place to be able to do that I will get into a little bit later. So those are the goals for this work. And now I would like to share the 5 institutions that we are moving forward with. The first one is Elizabeth City State University, Fayetteville State University, Johnson C. Smith University, Shaw University, and Winston-Salem State. So we are thrilled to be working with these 5 institutions. They will be working on a variety of different projects that range from credit for prior learning, all the way to comprehensive student supports for adult learners. And so there will be many things to glean from this work over the next 2 years or so. As I mentioned before, we put a lot of intentionality and care into building out this work. And so there are different components, as you can see here. The first I would like to mention is we have UNCF's Frederick D. Patterson Research Institute leading the evaluation and learning of this work. We also have Dr. Kathy Thompson and her team, who is providing technical assistance and will help really just shepherd this work with these 5 institutions. We also have Drs. Steve D. Mobley Jr. and Crystal L. Williams, both assistant professors at the University of Alabama, serving in an advisory role in really advising the foundation on this work. And then lastly, we have journalist Autumn Arnett, who is tasked with chronicling the stories of these 5 institutions as they embark on this work, and really documenting the stories of Black adult learners at HBCUs overall, to shine a spotlight on that particular population. As of 2019, taken together, the enrollment at these 5 institutions comprises a quarter of adult learners. And this year's data is actually reflects a proportion of adult learners that is slightly higher than that. And so the potential for impact of this work is tremendous. We know from our work, and we know from the research, that when you invest in HBCUs, the ROI is much greater because of all of the assets and the community cultural wealth that they embody, from their faculty to their students and to their staff. And so our hope is that with the recent influx of funding that has come through for HBCUs, our hope is that it's not seasonal, that it's not a season, that it's here to stay year after year, and that policymakers and philanthropists continue to pour funding into these institutions, which have really been places of refuge for Black folks since their inception. So those are our goals. This is the work that we are doing at Lumina Foundation. We are excited that you are all here to join us. We hope that we have a great conversation today in this morning's convening. And we look forward to engaging in this work. Please do share your thoughts, your feedback on social media with the hashtag Lumina HBCU ALI. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard and Dr. Haywood, for that warm welcome and helpful overview. We will now hear from Dr. Crystal Williams, Assistant Professor of Higher Education Administration at the University of Alabama. Dr. Williams will facilitate a panel discussion that explores the historical and contemporary contributions of HBCUs. And please be sure to share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag Lumina HBCU ALI.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Ms. Morgan, for that lovely introduction. It is my pleasure and indeed my honor to be able to moderate the first panel for today. Again, my name is Crystal Williams. I am an assistant professor of higher education at the University of Alabama. I completed my doctoral work at the University of Michigan, but I am from a long legacy of HBCUs. I myself graduated from Clark Atlanta University for my undergraduate and master's degree. My sister is also a Clark Atlanta graduate. My father is a graduate of Wiley College, home of the great debaters. And my grandmother attended Houston-Tillotson in Austin, Texas. And so it is indeed my honor to be a part of the leadership team for the Lumina HBCU Adult Learners Initiative. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Good morning. So first we have Dr. Alston. Dr. Alston is an associate professor at North Carolina A&T. Her research focuses on the sociocultural intricacies of women, minorities, and disenfranchised groups as adult learners and adult educators. Dr. Alston completed her BS from East Carolina University, her MS from North Carolina A&T, and her PhD from Texas State University. Second, we have Dr. Crystal DeGregory, my namesake. Dr. DeGregory is a research fellow at the Center for Historic Preservation at Middle Tennessee State University. She is a historian and storyteller whose research interests include Black higher education and college student activism. Dr. DeGregory is the founder and executive director of HBCU Story, so please check it out. She received her BA from Fisk University and her PhD and MS from Vanderbilt University. Welcome, Dr. DeGregory. We also have Dr. Paulette Dillard. Dr. Dillard, President Dillard, is the president of Shaw University. She is the 18th president to be exact. She has a rich history teaching, having taught biology for over 20 years at various institutions. She completed her BS at Barbara Scotia College, an MBA at Belmont University, and she is also a proud graduate of the Clark Atlanta University, where she completed her doctoral studies. Go Clark Atlanta. Always great to see another Panther. And last but not least, we have Dr. Martha Matkins. Dr. Matkins is the Associate Provost of Online Education at Morehouse College, so the AUC is well represented today. Her role includes developing, implementing, and maintaining a college-wide academic, instructional, and technology strategic plan. She completed her MS at the Illinois Institute of Technology and her PhD from Northern Illinois University. Welcome to all. Good morning. Thank you for your time. So the title for today's panel discussion is Centering Adult Learners at HBCUs, Historic and Contemporary Contributions. So I just really want to start from this concept of centering Black adult learners and really focusing on that demographic. So from your purview, why is it even important that we do that? Why is it important that we focus on Black adult learners? And what are some of the important distinctions for this particular demographics of students?
I'll jump in there and start, Crystal. Good morning, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. It has been a joy to study adult education for a long time. And, for me, my first introduction of an adult learner was actually my mother. And at the time, I didn't realize it. But my mother was a full-time mother, full-time employee. She was an assistant principal. She was a teacher, and then she became an assistant principal. And I watched her go to school and take classes one semester at a time to pursue her master's and her specialist certifications, as well as her doctorate from Virginia Tech University. And I didn't understand why would my mom go away for the summer, right? I didn't understand why she was gone, but now I know that she was on campus because her being an adult learner, she had access to different type of resources when she was on campus. So she made that sacrifice and would go and stay on campus so that she can pursue her and complete her coursework. And so, for adult learners, in various settings, not just HBCUs, but, they arrive at our campuses with a palette of life experiences. But this palette is also colored with age, right? It's colored with the fact that they may have a full-time job or that they have other roles and responsibilities where they have to figure out how do they integrate this schoolwork and life work, but also they have that racial layer, right? Because of the society that we live in, and we don't really know fully some of the experiences that they may have experienced prior to, right, in their earlier schooling, or what they experience on their day to day when it comes to just them working and learning within the workplace. And so, for this particular population, it's really I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic. I'm really encouraged by the potential of what we could do specifically at HBCUs. One thing that really stood out to me is this statistic that came out last year, and it's out of the America's Opportunities Gap by the number. And when I first glanced at it and learned about it, I think I had a different perspective than some people. Almost 50% of Black Americans receive no formal education beyond high school, and only 15.3% receive bachelor's degrees. So when someone hears that or they read that, the first thing that they may want to think about is, oh, the K-12 system. But what I immediately thought about is 50% of people who look like me have the potential to be an adult learner. 50% of people who look like me have the potential to join and come to our campuses and engage. So the question that I have is, are we ready to support that? And what will that look like? What does that need to look like?
Awesome. Thank you for those reflections and sharing those statistics. Dr. DeGregory, you are the historian in the bunch. So I really want to ask you a question about the history of HBCUs catering to Black adult learners from a historical perspective. What does that look like?
Yeah, that looks strangely familiar, actually. If you think about the challenges that 50% of Black America faces today regarding higher education, imagine that being 100 or more percent a century or more ago. And so HBCUs have never had the liberty of being particularly choosy. The founding missions and visions of these institutions were always to serve the least of these. At many of these institutions' founding, certainly those of which were founded in the post-Civil War period. There's the line in Fisk history, which says at the opening day of classes, it served students anywhere from 7 to 70 years of age.
Mm.
And with time, of course, some of that changed, but the capacity to do so and to do so well has not changed. We still have the ability to serve Black students, arguably, I would say, with certainty, better than other types of institutions. And so, given that adult learners are even more at risk of being lost in the shuffle of life, in the burden of white supremacy, it is important that we, turn our view and our gaze back to um, the folk in church would say the old landmark, just doing all that we know how to do incredibly well and not being extraordinarily preoccupied with white gaze or white value for what it is we do. When I see instructors going viral for holding babies as adult learners sit in their classrooms, I think to myself, oh, we used to do that all the time at Fisk, right? And somewhere along the way, we allowed to some degree those external measures of value to make us kind of shy away from the things that we did so extraordinarily well. So I think now is a great time to turn back to those things that we did before the mainstream academia coined them, whether it's living learning environments or that this kind of these notions about faculty and staff living and learning and leading among the students that they teach. And the same is true for adult learners. We have historically done this better than anyone else. And it is just great to have the tools, both financial and human, with which to continue to do that work.
Awesome. Those are really, really important insights. Speaking about history, Dr. Dillard, I understand that Shaw University has a longstanding history of serving Black adult learners. Why has that focus been so important at your institution in particular?
As Dr. DeGregory just mentioned, part of our mission and founding was around the education of the whole family. In our communities, we could not rely on just one person in the family to be educated. So Shaw's history dates back to educating women by building the first co-ed dorm on a co-ed female dorm on a co-ed campus in 1873. Now think, 1873. This was pre-women's suffrage. This was, post-slavery. This and the impetus there was that everybody in the family needed an education. Initially, that education was about being spiritually grounded, because if you had faith, then you had the means by which you could build a family and have an opportunity to build community. And one of the things that's been important to Shaw is we went into communities where folk wanted to stay and make a difference in that community. And so Shaw created instructional sites in rural cities, in urban cities, so that it was easier to find the foundational support that you needed to pursue an education. Because if you had not had that opportunity, just going to a college and into a classroom for a lot of Black adult learners, that was a frightening and unaffordable, position. And so Shaw created instructional sites all across the state of North Carolina to begin to give uh, pathways for adults to better themselves and better their community. And so we created an opportunity for teachers to be certified and stay in rural classrooms, because we know what the impact of having someone that looks like you, in the early grades. And so those were very important um, uh, initiatives for Shaw. The other thing was the criminal justice system. We know what is happening and has been happening there. So many of our adult learners went into criminal justice pathways. So teaching, social work, all of the kinds of careers that strengthen a community was what Shaw was about early on. And that's what its entire founding has been about. So historically, we've always known that you have to go for the entire family, which includes the community, and from there we could begin to change the course, for Black Americans in general. And we are, as Dr. DeGregory indicated, we're going back to what we know that we can do well, because the need is even greater now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So we touched a bit on the value of HBCUs in serving Black adult learners from a historical lens. Now I want to pivot a little bit and talk about some contemporary contributions and perspectives. So Dr. Alston, I know you do a lot of work in this particular area. So from a contemporary perspective, what are some of the prevailing issues facing Black adult learners that you have found from your research?
So one of the prevailing issues is not so much an issue for the adult learner, but it's an issue within the institutions. We have to do a different approach, right? We have to have a different approach to really taking the time and understanding this population, right? We have to collect so much data. Everything is data driven, everything is evidence supported, right? But we really have to figure out, at our HBCUs in particular, we have to figure out some different strategies to understand the experiences, how to better support. We go in with a lot of assumptions, right? So that's one of the challenges, is that adult learners, and this is not just at HBCUs, but at HBCUs traditionally, right, since the 80s, they have supported the traditional age student, okay? And even as simple as shifting the mindset of how do we support this population. For example, stop calling them non-traditional students. That's one of the barriers, right? So when they hear that, it has a deficit tone, and we know better, right? So a more appropriate language would be post-traditional students, which is what myself and my colleagues, this is what we used in our research. We were fortunate enough last year to be awarded a $35,000 grant with the UNC system, right? And I know that a lot of people have read about that, but this grant did not support for us to do research to gather institutional data, right? This grant supported us to create a consortium, right, of faculty to help them understand how to develop and provide them with strategies to increase their engagement of adult learners when it comes to undergraduate research, right? So if you know me, I love research, and I am a firm believer that I want more people who look like me, look like you beautiful queens that I'm sharing this panel with, right? I want for us to understand research. I want for us to develop our skills so that we go and do research in a different way, because we operate out of a different positionality as researchers, right? And so one of the things that I learned as I was, talking with Dr. Erin Lynch, who's at Winston-Salem State, and Dr. Taisha Paul, who are my collaborators, we were puzzled that we couldn't even find research about adult learners engaging in undergraduate research, as if they don't exist. And so we said, well, what's going on here? And to no surprise, the same 3 public institutions who were awarded with your grant, these are the ones in North Carolina that we found that had the highest percentage of adult learners, right? So what we had a series of workshops where we identified and sent the invitation to different faculty and said, hey, come on and participate. The first workshop focused on just understanding who the adult learner was, right? Who is this? What are some of the characteristics? Because the reality is that a lot of faculty, they are not professionally trained. They're trained in their discipline area. They don't understand adult learners, or even if they have any differences, that's not something that they were supposed to learn, quote unquote, in their doctoral programs or their advanced degree programs. So that was the first thing that we had to do. The second thing is that we wanted to create a community of practice. Right. So part of my research really focuses on community of practice and creating a shared space for people to be vulnerable, for them to say, I did not understand, but now that I do understand, can you help me? Let's talk about this. And we also provided them professional development, where we had a career trainer come in to teach them, think about how can you do something different. If you're having a cure, right? If you're engaged in undergraduate research only in your classroom, or you're saying, hey, can you come at this time during the day, say 11 o'clock, and meet as a group? Where are your adult learners? A lot of them are working. Right? A lot of them may have some other things, doctor's appointments, or their caregivers, etc. So how are you creating this additional space? So that's what that project focused on, was just creating a space where people could come and just learn about what are some of the other strategies that either people are using at other institutions they can collectively use. Another thing that came out of this particular grant was it developed a different type of network, right? So that if you didn't have the resources at your institution, whether it's individual human resources or financial resources, how can you partner with other institutions within the UNC system, particularly your HBCUs, right? And figure out how to have cross institutional cures, right? Or take a component, an assignment, and create that as a cure. And so it was really a beautiful opportunity for individuals to have that time. And I know that they've continued on those conversations. They've continued, and they've even implemented some of their work. So what we hope to do in the future is to do a follow-up and say, hey, what has your experience been like? Now that you've had time to reflect on it and develop, what are some of the changes that you've seen? Have you increased your numbers when it comes to engaging in undergraduate research? And if so, what does that look like? So I think that, there's plenty of work for us to do. So if anyone's interested in collaborating, please holler at me. Okay. Send me an email, send me a tweet, shout me out on LinkedIn. I'm excited and ready, but we really don't know all that we should know right now. And we have to kind of separate ourselves from these assumptions that we have that adult learners are just adult learners, or they have too much on their plate. No, we can make some adjustments and figure out how to better support them and engage them as researchers, and engage them as we do with our traditional age students who are campus bound.
And we know if any institutions can do that well, it is our HBCUs, right? Continuing with this perspective of contemporary issues regarding Black adult learners, Dr. Matkins, I know that you are doing some fabulous work at Morehouse College, focusing specifically on Black male adult learners. And so I wanted to get some insights and some expertise from you. Based on your position as the Associate Provost of Online Education, what are some of the unique needs and student support needs of Black adult learners in particular?
Thank you. So for some of the needs, I would say are the same. The difference is, as some of my colleagues have said, is that this student population is, when we say adult, that adult learner now is 18, because there are some of our students that come to college that are already fathers, right? And they have automatically been put into adulthood. Some of the things that are most important, I think, is being able to have a space where you can hear their voice. We have something called the Morehouse Experience. It was the quote freshman experience, but we've kind of curated that, so it's called the Morehouse Experience. It's where the brothers come together, and they start 2 weeks before the semester starts. They get in, on Zoom. They share their thoughts. but they also, what they find out is they have so much in common, right? And so they start to build that support there. Some of the same supports that you have on for our regular students, for example, online tutor, we have online tutoring, we have online advising. We just have those touch points that we know that they need. Our curriculum is designed for that student. The case studies kind of speak to real life experiences, which is what these brothers are bringing in. And so this is our launch, the first one for August. And so as we continue to assess, in fact, I'm doing a survey this week, as we continue to assess our data and talk about data, bringing in data to say, okay, what are we doing now to make this a great experience for our brothers, but also what can we do better for the next group? So again, having that support, having the facilitators that look like them, that can speak to them, and again, bringing in content and allowing them. A lot of them have been in business for 20 years, 30 years. Some of them they were at Morehouse 25 years ago. Life happened. They're married. They've opened up. They've gone in the industry and they come back. And so what they bring is a different perspective. So I think we need to be prepared to accept that as part of our curriculum build, and that they're bringing all this knowledge to the table. So continuing to look at, again, support systems that we currently have, and also looking at what we can do I myself went to graduate school when I worked full time, and what I needed was, I just needed to know my degree completion timeline. I needed to know, were there any resources that I could reach, because I had a life. And so I think we have to make sure that we don't overwhelm them, but we also know that they have access to whatever they need. So we're continuing to do that as an institution, and we're excited about building a team of the Morehouse online experience of different folks that can kind of be touch points for the brothers as they go through the program.
Awesome. I wanted to ask a related follow-up question, Dr. Mackins, if I may, because I think a lot of institutions are actually leaning into this idea of online education, especially in a pandemic scenario, right? Or prompted by that, and the continuation of that even now. And I wanted to get some insights from you about what you think are some important shifts that other institutions may consider who are interested in better serving male Black adult learners, and if there's anything related to online education that other institutions should consider, what would some of those things be, given your expertise and experiences?
Right. So, with online education, I think sometimes we have a tendency to overthink what we're doing. They think this is magic formula, right? And while there is a lift from our traditional, using that word, for our traditional content delivery, it's also keeping that connection with the students, making sure that your content you're obviously meeting your outcomes. That's one thing that I drive home to the faculty, having the faculty support system in place. So we have a lot of workshops for our faculty members. We have training, and we also have for the students, we have workshops for them. As I mentioned, online tutoring. When you're moving into an online environment, you really want to make sure that you say, what am I doing in the classroom that I don't necessarily have to do online, but I can still meet my outcomes? We took 16-week courses and made them 8 weeks. The faculty members they struggled a little bit. Well, I want this paper. I still want to do that project. I said, but think about it. This is a student that is not necessarily doing the same thing that your other student is doing. They're not going to do the same type of maybe internship that your student is. They're probably going to do their internship based on their current job experience. So let's think about how we can do that in the same way, but give them the same experience. With the Morehouse experience course, which, as I said, is like the orientation, we call it's the orientation. It was freshman experience, it's Morehouse experience. Like I said, they get together, and there were 240 brothers in a Zoom room sharing their real world experience and getting acclimated and telling their stories about how they come. That, to me, was the most important piece of the curriculum, because what it did is it set the tone. It created this comfort level for them to know that there are other brothers that are there. And so I say most importantly, if you're going to have a program, you want to also have a type of course where there's a gathering, right? Where there's a safe space, let's call it that, right? Where there's this safe space where you can have these conversations and not necessarily talk about curriculum, but bring the world experience, and it's a time for networking too, right? So you meet somebody in there, you never know. You might end up with an internship, you might end up with a job after graduation. Everybody is not necessarily on the same path to I want to graduate and get a job. A lot of these brothers just saying, I want my Morehouse degree, and that's it because they've already gone through their career. So making sure, again, don't overthink the online, but put best practices in there. Make sure you have training, and have people that are invested in making sure that that content is delivered with quality.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Dr. Alston, I want to transition to you a bit because we talked a bit about online education and kind of shifts in pedagogy, but I'm curious to know more about the unique mentoring and advising needs of Black adult learners and what you have learned from your research in this particular area.
So thank you for that. I want to say something about what Dr. Mathis just said. And it's also connected to some of the conversation that we've started off with the historical. I don't want people to forget about George Washington Carver and his Jessup wagon, right? And when Dr. President Dillard talked about community engagement, right? Online is great, but there are some adult learners that, you know, we might need to go to them. We might need to post up at a community center because it's easier to take one of me to go reach out 20 and touch 20 of those. So I don't want us to I don't want that to be lost in this conversation either, right? Because I do wonder if we need to look at that, and that could that be a potential strategy as well to complement, right? To further support and not to replace the online engagement. So I had to put that. So when it comes to mentoring in general, right? Mentoring is difficult. Mentoring involves power dynamics, and especially when you have this notion of age, and you have blackness, and you have femaleness, and you have other characteristics, right? So all of those socially constructed images and stereotypes, they do influence the mentoring relationship. So the first thing is this: not every faculty member is prepared to mentor an adult learner. Yep, I said it. I said it. They're not, right? And that's okay. That's okay. We have to say that that is okay. And so if you as a faculty member, if you're saying, you know what, I might not be the best to mentor, then yes, you need to speak up and either seek professional development or say, hey, department chair or colleague, can you help me out? Or just say, you know what, maybe I'm not the best one, but let me help you find someone, right? Let me help you to identify a mentor. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that one of the frameworks that I really include in my work, and Kathy Hansman and we just published a book chapter in the handbook of adult and continuing education focused on mentoring adult learners. But there is this notion by Fletcher of possible selves. Okay. And this is really, I believe this is really important when it comes to the adult learner, because again, they come to us with a plethora of experiences. And sometimes they're not ready or even able to process and apply the language of their experiences, right? In particular, if they've had a negative experience within an educational space, within a learning space, right? So you have to keep that in mind. And so possible selves just to help them to see an opportunity of the different positions and pathways that they can go when it comes to their learning and development. Okay. So possible sales would include you as a mentor, you know, speaking from a place of affirmation, right? Allowing autonomy, right? That's one of the andragogical principles, right? Is that the learner kind of is involved in, and there's a self-directedness or a guide within self, right? That the mentor and the teacher or the faculty member doesn't just tell the adult learner how to do this and where to go. It's a partnership. And so you need to listen, but you need to affirm and you need to recognize that they are in a space of learning. Again, reduce or remove the assumptions that just because they have life experiences, oh, you're fine, right? But then don't also, like Dr. Matkin said, don't overwhelm them, right? Some may be very well, you know, comfortable. And so your approach to mentoring a traditional age student who just left their parents' house can't be the same approach for your adult learner. Okay. And so in one of the studies that I did with funding supported by NACADA, which is the National Academy for Academic Advising, my colleague and I, Dr. Charlene Coopwood, we did a qualitative study, and we had the opportunity to interview 10 faculty from several different HBCUs on the East Coast, right? And the thing that we found out that they experienced the most trouble, and this was pre-pandemic, time, virtual advisement, and individual and group collaboration. What they found is that sometimes when it comes to mentoring adult learners, the group approach works better than an individual approach. Number one, the lack of time or limits of time. We don't want to say lack of time, but the limitation on number one, a single faculty member, but also your multiple adult learners. If you collect them in the group, you can accomplish more, right? So when Dr. Matkin spoke about, having that gathering space, yes, create gathering spaces as you mentor these adult learners. But then the other thing is, as faculty and as well as staff, right? Become comfortable with engaging in virtual spaces. I think that was a challenge before the pandemic. I think the pandemic has propelled us. But if you're not comfortable with that, I implore you, please become comfortable, right? Because that is the way that sometimes might be best for us to reach our adult learners. If they're really busy, guess what? They can FaceTime with you or get on the Zoom on their phone. That doesn't mean that they're not paying attention. That means that they're doing what they have to do because they want to complete their degree, but they also have to figure out how to integrate all of the other things that are going on in their lives, right? And so you just want to make sure that you can support their. Don't forget that this is also a psychosocial development phase for adult learners in higher ed, right? Um, and while the learning is important, they're also in a place of development. So continue to keep them encouraged. Continue to refrain from othering them because of their age, right? Because we don't know who has othered them or who others them at work, who others them outside of school, right? I'm gonna stop because I could keep going on and on, Crystal.
No. This is all very helpful information. Thank you so much. You have such a wealth of expertise. We're trying to learn as much as we can. We really appreciate it. Yes.
Is it possible for me to chime in here?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. I didn't know the rules.
Go ahead.
Okay. But I think that raises an interesting point because traditionally, no one would argue that HBCUs, if you had to rank our strengths, chief among them would be our sense of family/community and the way in which we develop that in an on-campus environment. And so these two strengths, I don't want to say are sometimes challenges for adult learners, but rather opportunities for us to improve on. I hate to invoke my mother, but I have a way of telling her, yes, I am your child, but I am not a child. And sometimes this is a rather difficult concept for the powers that be on HBCU campuses to grasp that students, no matter what their age, are customers and by and large are all adults, even if only young adults. And the deference that we traditionally expect in all things, we tend to experience differently in in adult learners who have, as we've said, as we all know, lived a life and are living a life and do bring those experiences with them to the campus environment. And so herein lies the other challenge, not most of, but the vast majority of the things that we recall about our HBCU experiences, interpersonal experiences, were face to face. And so HBCUs in the 21st, I would like to say post-pandemic world, but ongoing pandemic world, are faced with the challenge of how do we translate that face-to-face on-campus community experience across a computer screen, across a television, across a telephone, and those things, while they are challenging, it's not without hope. It's not a challenge that we cannot rise to meet, but I do think that it is an elephant in the room. It's a big elephant. It's like two elephants in one room because we do have a tendency to look at our students as children. And, adult learners are nobody, certainly not our children anymore. And given that so much of what we translate in terms of how we make our students feel comes from those touches, those literal touches, those literal, face-to-face interactions. As Dr. Mackins has referred to at Morehouse, how do you translate that energy, that energy that you get from just being shoulder to shoulder, a brother to brother in a room across a computer screen is quite a challenge indeed.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We love our elephants, but not those, right?
Come on now. Come on now.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
So I now want to pivot a little bit. Actually, I want to piggyback off of what you said, Dr. DeGregory and Dr. Alston, in thinking about serving adult learners. And President Dillard, I know that Shaw University has a strong history of doing this, and we've talked about that. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the lessons learned that your institution has gathered throughout the history of having served this particular demographic, and things that other institutions may be able to borrow from or learn from.
Great question. One of the things that we have experienced is that there's a segment that we tend to forget about when we're talking about, degree seeking. And those are the ones that Dr. Matkins mentioned had businesses for, 20, 30 years. Or that has been the means by which they've been able to support their children. And so we partnered with the community college and with the Rotary Club to create what was called Launch Raleigh. And those adults were folks that became wanting to get better at doing business. And so we created an opportunity for them to come as a cohort and go through the whole training and education on owning a business, from the accounting to the social media, all of that, alongside students who were doing it as part of a degree. And the learning was amazing, because you had students now side by side with successful business people who were learning to put some structure around running a business and being able to overcome some of the many pitfalls of being a business owner. And you had students learning what it's like in the real world to have a business. And I think that one of the important aspects of our campuses is most students operate businesses of every kind from the time they come to college. If it's hairstyling, if it's, barbershop, it's, clothes designing. I mean, they do it all, and being able to translate that into a business that is supporting them, as opposed to having to work 3 jobs in order to afford your education, that leaves very little time for classroom endeavors. So one of the things that we've learned is that it's important to take what folk already do and give credit for that, in accordance with the required regulations. But there is strength in doing that, and it makes the educational journey not so full of barriers that I've got to overcome these requirements that were built for students other than those with life experiences. And so if I could emphasize one thing to anyone getting into that space, is that the value of combining the typical out of high school student with the, you know, the student that has life experiences, there is amazing value in that, because the lived experiences for our community are different than the lived experiences for other communities. And we need to be able to have the younger ones see how you overcome in spite of. And there is so much richness in that. So, wherein we have to deal with the needs of the adult learner specifically, do not lose the richness of having the two populations together, because the exchange and just the cohort produces some amazing outcomes for both groups. So that would be one thing that I would share with my panelists and any institution that is anticipating this work. There is richness across the spectrum in, having their individual needs met, but there's value in having them together as well.
Awesome. I think that's a really interesting perspective, because I think sometimes people feel like, oh, adult learners should be over here, or post-traditional. I learned a word today. Post-traditional students should be over here, and traditional students should be over there. But the idea of blending those cohorts and, leaning to this idea of each one teach one.
Yes.
In a different way. I think that's really important. That's really good advice. Dr. DeGregory, we started with history. We have a couple of minutes here. I want to wrap up with history as well. What insights might various institutions glean from the history of HBCUs to better prepare to serve Black adult learners in the future?
Lord have mercy. The secrets, the keys to the kingdom. I can't tell that, they may be watching and then they got our secrets. No. Listen, whatever you do, you have to first start with care. And I think that is the principal point from which all good works spring. Right. And so first you have care, and then you build capacity, right? You use that care to really look at the room and say, what is it that I can do better? And I know that's rather unpopular, because people only want to talk about the things that they already do well. But I think that it's important that we say, hey, we don't get everything exactly right. There are things that we can improve upon, and we can do that by virtue of the kind of exchange that President Dillard referred to. As a young professor at Tennessee State, from which I received a second master's degree, that one in education, I taught students sometimes 30 years older than I was, and it was fine. It was great. Sometimes it was them that, wrangled the class and, tried to say, look, y'all, you really need to take advantage of this opportunity. You really don't understand how precious this is, that you're given this opportunity at this moment of your life. I think that's very important. I think institutionally, the other gift that these post-traditional students offer to us is that in many instances, I'm going to get on a ledge here, and Dr. Alston and I maybe one day can team up and see if this is actually true. But I would imagine that among them, there is a greater culture of giving. The giving that we are trying to cultivate in 19 and 20-year-olds who say to themselves, look, I might as well spend this $5 on the weather has changed, so a pumpkin spice latte, that ain't gonna do nothing for this school. I might as well just keep this $5 and make myself happy. But among older people, they have an understanding that debts add up. and contributions add up as well. And so I think that beyond the classroom, there are some cultural and social lessons that these students are able to provide to their younger cohorts in terms of, here's an opportunity, here's something that matters, here's something that I wish I knew, I wish I did, I wish I didn't do. Had I known differently, I would have done differently. And I think that very much is true for the HBCU experience serving this population in general. I think there are so many things that over time and space we have done so extraordinarily well, but because we don't get credit for it, we've moved away from those things that we've done traditionally well, better than anyone else. And so it's time to return to those things. But as Dr. Alston says, numbers matter, metrics matter, outcomes matter. And unless we can put pen to paper to demonstrate to the wider higher education landscape and also to our prospective and current students the value of these types of instructions, we will find ourselves having created an opportunity that someone else gets the better of.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think it is important that we recognize our strengths and cling to those as opposed to moving away from those. And quite honestly, people are trying to figure out what that is and adopting them, right? And you've moved on from them. So I think knowing who you are and clinging to that is really going to be important as institutions and as people, quite honestly. So I have one last question for everyone. So anyone can chime in on this, but as you all are aware, this convening is being sponsored under the leadership of Lumina Foundation. So I'm really curious to know what you see as the future work or the needed work from philanthropic communities. So the question is, what should the philanthropic community be thinking about with regards to supporting initiatives that are Black adult learner centered? So what types of things should places like Lumina Foundation and other nonprofits be thinking about in supporting this demographic?
I would like to begin by saying that in some instances, the lift is significant, and that the resources have to match the interest in seeing the achievement of the goal. It's great to have stretch goals where you want to see a percentage of Black adults with post-secondary degrees or credentials, but the investment has to be equal to what is that lift. And one of the things that HBCUs, and it is well documented, that their outcomes, what they're able to achieve, is phenomenal. And they've had to do it with little or nothing in terms of what's available. So I would encourage philanthropic organizations to really, when you think about what is your goal, make that equal to what is the investment in making that happen. And don't continue with this idea that, HBCUs have been able to make bricks out of straw for so long that you continue to give us straw to make bricks. And I say that certainly grateful for the support, but asking that, attention be given to what it takes to do that when you're coming from a position of, less, and so, so make that investment, equal to, the lift, and continue to do what you're doing. We're grateful, but, we need, the investments to be equal to what the challenge is that we're trying to overcome.
Awesome. Give us bricks and not straws. Any other quick reflections? We have like 60 seconds.
Okay, I'm gonna just say this quickly because I would be remiss if I didn't. The one thing I would love for philanthropic organizations and others who are just willing to provide resources, I'm a proud graduate of the last standing graduate program in adult education. The Master of Science in Adult Education at North Carolina A&T produces high quality professionals, high quality researchers. So many of us have gone on to pursue our PhDs. Many of us have gone on and we are in administrative spaces throughout higher education as well as workforce education and other spaces, right? So it's very hard to provide and identify funding to support scholarships when it comes to the core field of adult education, right? So that's one thing. If you need to reach out to me, email me. I will meet with you, right? Because I know the power that we have when it comes to how we pour into our students at the HBCUs. I would love to see more graduate programs, and I would love to see a doctoral program in adult education with an emphasis on HBCUs or where Black adult learners are centered, because that's the one thing that we've done in our program. We have been unapologetic that we place emphasis on the Black diaspora. It was like that when I was a master's student, and I am honored to be able to be a faculty and pour that same stuff into my students today, right?
Awesome.
So that is the one thing. It's different than NSF, it's different than STEM, but we all see that the adult learner is important. And it's not just important to HBCUs, it's important to society. It's important to the economy. So if those are the things that are important to you, right? It's important to healthcare, to mental wellness, then pour and provide those resources, right? So that we can better support the research and the theory advancement as well as our practice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Supporting adult learners.
That's very important. Thank you so much. Sorry to cut you off, but I don't want to get fired. So on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Alston. I want to extend a warm thank you to each of you all for your thoughts, your insights, for having such an engaging conversation, for being up so early in the morning in the Central Time Zone, because I am also there with you, okay? So thank you again for your time. And now I will turn it back over to Dr. Haywood.
Thank you. That was a great chat. And a great panel. I don't know how you all are feeling, but I am excited to dive into the rest of the morning agenda. And thank you, Dr. Williams, for leading us in that great conversation. I've seen lots of engagement on Twitter. So please continue to share your thoughts and feedback there with the hashtag Lumina HBCU ALI. I also wanted to mention we do have a slight technical glitch going on in our chat feature, and we are working to resolve that, and we appreciate you all continuing to engage there in the chat. Today, I am here with Dr. David Wilson, president of Morgan State University. Zainab Okolo, my colleague, will be dropping his bio in the chat. He has a very accomplished and fantastic bio that we want you all to engage with and read about. Today, what we are going to talk about is some of the great work that Morgan State University has been doing in terms of engaging and re-engaging adult learners. Welcome and good morning, Dr. Wilson.
Dr. Haywood, good morning. Thank you very much for having me in this dialogue this morning.
Yes, thank you for being here. Well, I have so many questions for you, so I want to jump right into it if that's okay with you. I wanted to start off by asking, how did Morgan State enter into this work? I know you've been president there at Morgan State for over a decade, which is a very long time. And so, you've been thinking about this. This work did not arrive with the Morgan Completes You initiative that was announced earlier this year. How is it that you kind of entered into this work and started thinking about how Morgan State could better serve Black adults?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. And first of all, let me thank the Lumina Foundation, for the tremendous investment that it is making in North Carolina HBCUs, hopefully to position those institutions to be more effective as well in ministering to the needs of adult learners. Dr. Haywood, Morgan's entry into the adult learning space actually has been in place for a while. And so it really started with a local foundation here in Baltimore, the Goldsecker Foundation, um, through the will of that particular benefactor. Morgan State University gets an annual appropriation from that every year. And there's a focus there on adult learners. And so for more than 20 years, they have funded about 12 to 15 adult students who wanted to return to Morgan and get their degrees. And so we've been kind of in this space with a small cohort of students for a while. And then I arrived here in 2010, and we decided to use one of the institutions that I headed to basically send a communique to those students to see if they would be interested in coming back to get a degree if that opportunity presented themselves. And so that was sort of my kind of beginning to understand that there was a market out there, that if institutions were aggressive, they could go after that market. And then I came to Morgan. We decided that we wanted to put in place a strategic plan that would be extremely focused on student success. And one of the first things we did was to look at our retention rates, our graduation rates, and it was not where any of us wanted it to be. And as a result, we asked our institutional research division to do the same thing that I had seen in Wisconsin, to go back and look at the number of individuals who had left Morgan with 90 credits or more, with a 2.0 grade point average, without a degree, and to give us those names. Well, to make a long story short, to this day, they have identified about over 200 or so such individuals. I then set aside in my budget some dollars to provide them with a modest scholarship if they would come back. And over half of them have come back. And so that was the beginning. We call that program, if you will, the Reclamation Project here in Morgan. The state of Maryland was so impressed with that it, I think, took our program and took it statewide and is now called the Near Completist Program. But that was our initial entry into the adult space. How do you get individuals who had tasted the magic of a college experience, left many of them with tremendous debt, $45,000 in loan debt, with no credential. And we felt that we had to go after those students very aggressively. And then one other piece here, and then we can move on. About 4 or so years ago, we discovered here at Morgan that we really did not have at the baccalaureate level an interdisciplinary bachelor's degree, where students were coming, they thought they wanted to major in one thing, they were here for a year or two, they didn't want to major in that, but they had not figured out what else they wanted to major in. And we looked across the country, and many institutions have these interdisciplinary baccalaureate degrees. And so we developed a degree here called the Bachelor's of Applied Liberal Studies. And we launched it in 2017. That right now is one of the fastest growing programs here at Morgan. Over half of the students are adult learners, and they are coming back to finish, in many instances, what they started. And so by the time we got to the Morgan Completes You initiative, we had some experience under our belt that we could draw on.
That's great. Thank you for that background. So as we think about the Morgan Completes You initiative and the work you've done leading up to that, Earlier this year, you all shared the press release around Morgan Completes You, which will offer 18 degrees to adults that have some post-secondary credits, but no degree. And 8 of those degree pathways are aimed at adults hoping to get a bachelor's at the undergraduate level. So can you talk a little bit about, this is a very intentionally thought out approach to serving adults. You created whole entirely new degree pathways, right? Despite having other potential degree pathways that they could have come in through. So can you talk a little bit about what you were thinking as an institution, what you and your staff and faculty were thinking as you put together the Morgan Completes You initiative, including the supports that Black adults need to complete their degrees, and also how employment outcomes informed the design of the initiative overall?
The audience may not be aware that I also serve as a member of the board of directors of the Lumina Foundation. And as such, at many of the meetings that I would attend, I began to understand what was going on nationwide with regard to individuals with some college and no degree. And those numbers were astounding, like 36 million people with some college and no degree. And of that number, 600,000 of them were in Maryland. And so I brought that back to the cabinet, and we began to have conversations around a program that at the time we were calling Morgan Completes Maryland. And the cabinet was so excited about the concept that we could develop what we would call completer programs that a retired vice president said, well, Mr. President, let's not think that narrowly. We should be thinking Morgan Completes You wherever you are. You don't have to be in Maryland. And so that was the impetus. Number two, I serve on a board here in the Baltimore area called the Greater Baltimore Committee. And it is a board of about 70 of the top CEOs, primarily private corporate CEOs in the area. And I've been on this board for 10 years, and I do a lot of listening from employers as to what exactly are you looking for, not just in newly minted graduates, but even in employees that you currently have, that perhaps there have been some gaps in their preparation and they don't have the degree yet. And what I would take away from those meetings was the importance of interdisciplinary degrees, where you have 4 or 5 intersections, if you will. You have engineering crossing science, crossing global competence, and our institutions, they are just so rigid. And it's very, very hard sometimes to push departments to think about degrees other than in their own department. And so we brought that into the way of thinking, which is we got to think about now interdisciplinary degrees for individuals who have been swirling. They went here for a year or two, they got 15 credits, they went here for 20 credits, they went here, and they're not really interested in coming back to school to try and get a degree in the area where they started, if you will. There's just too many challenges here. And then the last was a book, actually, that was written by Jamie Mirasotis on human work. And I actually had it as required reading for everybody in the cabinet, all the deans, because that book spoke about the work of the future and the future of work. And so we put all those things together. And basically what it led to was this extraordinarily incredible opportunity where we pulled together these degree programs. I think every one of those programs involves a minimum of 5 schools in Morgan, be it engineering, architecture, business, education, liberal arts, social work, community health. And the deans are excited, the faculty is excited, and the board is just beyond excited because we see this as an incredible opportunity to create a lot of flexibility for adult learners, to put in place these completer programs that are not competitive with our traditional academic programs. And so, for example, in order to be admitted into one of the BS programs, you have to have accumulated 60 credits to be transferred in. And so this is not a program designed for you to come in as a freshman. We're going after that adult market. And so we know that these students might present us with 8 to 10 transcripts because they may have taken 5 courses at this institution, 6 at this community college, may have moved to another place in the United States and may have taken another 4 or 5. And the challenge for adult learners is that they haven't been able to find many institutions that can look over all of that and be comfortable modifying their own policies. And some of those policies are very dated to accommodate what the current needs are. And that's what we were able to do here in Morgan. We received a unanimous endorsement of what would be our faculty senate. It's called the University Council, as well as from our deans, provost, and ultimately a unanimous endorsement from our Board of Regents.
That's wonderful. And God bless the person in the registrar's office that kind of looks across those 8 to 10 transcripts and helps rectify that, because I can't even imagine the tedious work that goes into that. But it really is so important and a challenge that adult learners have, particularly Black adult learners, that as institutions, we're in a place to help them overcome that particular challenge, so that they're not losing credits that can amount to a degree. So I know you took the very brave step recently, and you put yourself in the shoes of a student, and you took some online courses so that you could better understand the experiences of students amidst the pandemic, and really to inform the reopening plans at Morgan State this past semester. But I'm curious, in doing that experience, as you put yourself in the shoes of a student taking an online course, how did that help you understand what it might be like for an adult student to come back to an HBCU and complete their degree there?
I had never taken an online course in my career. Yes, I've done some certifications online, whatever, IT certifications and this kind of certification, but never really a course, an academic course. And I thought it was essential for me as president to have some sense of what the lived experience was like for both our students and our faculty. Both at the toss of a coin had been placed into an environment, into a modality that 95% of them previously had not been. And that was just an epiphany for me. So first of all, what I would call the cacophony that unfolded in the online space where many of the students were was revelatory. Some of the students, of course, didn't have dedicated, spruced up spaces in their lived environment where all of a sudden, they are free from distraction and they could digest college level material with the kind of focus that was needed to maintain mastery or to acquire mastery. And so I saw that. I saw that when the class started, um, almost everyone in the household sometimes came to class. I mean, you had of the students, younger brothers and sisters who were in and out. You know, you had all kinds of things going on in the background. And so that was an education for me. Then the unevenness of the technology just created just an enormous divide. When the students are here on campus, and we've invested millions and millions of dollars in improving our IT infrastructure, computer labs, and so we don't have a major issue here on campus. But when all the students, and we were literally closed, are sent home and they don't have access to broadband. They don't have access to the internet, you know, on a consistent basis. That was a major, major challenge. And then on the part of our professors, many HBCUs, indeed, who knows, perhaps all of them can say the same thing, that our faculties are just amazing. You know, they are really some of the most amazing faculty that I have encountered in my 30 plus years of higher education. And what makes them so amazing is that, yes, you know, they have their PhDs from the best institutions in the country, the way any other faculty member would have. But they come to Morgan with this other thing. And that other thing is a level of care, a level of nurturing, a level of dedication and commitment to the overall success of the student, not just in the classroom, but their emotional well-being, that is somewhat rare. And so the two professors did not know each other, and they didn't know that I was monitoring their classes. But each of them opened their classes almost the same way. And it was the first 15 minutes, it was not about music. I took a music class and I also took a political science class. So 15 minutes or so went by where there was no discussion at all about musical theory. And there was no discussion at all about comparative politics. It was about, you know, Susie, how are you doing? And the students knew that that question was not a throwaway question. That Professor X really wanted to know, Susie, how are you doing? And so I came away from that experience with even a higher level of appreciation for the level of concern and the level of care that our faculty members also were bringing to that online modality with students. And so I like to say in the vernacular, I learned a hell of a lot. And that has certainly informed the way in which we have made, are making, and will continue to make decisions here at Morgan.
That's wonderful. And yes, such a big testament to HBCU faculty and, you know, the embedded cultural responsiveness that they have as they engage with their students. You know, I know as a funder working with all different types of institutions across different sectors, I know that when I work with the HBCUs, culturally responsive pedagogy is not one of the things we ever need to provide, you know, additional support or technical assistance on, because they get it. It's embedded, it's ingrained, it's there. So appreciate you sharing that.
And you know, we even had professors who were willing to go into their own pockets, or you know, and pay for students to grab a piece of technology that they needed. Of course, you know, we received tremendous philanthropic support from our alums and others to enable us to send student laptops and things that they didn't have. But that's another piece in terms of the cultural understanding of the institution that you see amongst faculty, is that many of them not hesitant about wanting to go into their pockets and help students if indeed they need it.
That's right. That's right. And it's actually a good segue into my next question. So, you know, as we think about both Black adults that have some college no degree or that have no post-secondary credits, as we think about their choice process, right? What is it that you think HBCUs uniquely offer to Black adults looking to obtain their bachelor's degree? And why is it that they might say, I want to go to Morgan State, or I want to go to Fayetteville State or Shaw over, some other predominantly white institution? What is it that your institution might uniquely offer to Black adults in particular?
So I think in order to address this question adequately, one has to kind of understand the great history of HBCUs. And that history has been one that has been replete with resilience, with parsimonious resources, with a level of stick-to-itiveness when perhaps everything in the external environment would appear to be crumbling around you. These institutions are the most resilient, innovative institutions, I think, in the history of American higher ed. And so, with that in mind, I would argue that adult learners, and Black adult learners in particular, many of them have had or are having experiences that mirror some of the way the HBCUs have existed over 150 years. And so, therefore, when these two things come together, that I've had so many challenges in my life which have prevented me from crossing the finish line at a college, whatever that is. I've never had enough money to do this. I have a family that I have to support. It's the lack of transportation. It's the lack of financial. Those are the challenges that adults are having, Black adults, in their daily lives. When you bring that to an institution that historically has had some of those same challenges, then you can rest assured that that institution understands how to meet you in your space, how to meet you where you are, and then how to point you, support you in the direction that you want to go. And that's why I think emphasizing adult learners and Black adult learners in particular, HBCUs, is so important. And if those individuals are looking at a Morgan versus another institution, I think we can say to them that if you come here, you know that we're going to develop a relationship with you. And that relationship is very important. And that relationship can be deeply rooted in caring that some may interpret as intrusive. We don't like to use that word, but it's so deeply rooted in caring, meaning that you may get a phone call from us, saying, Jasmine, what's going on? Well, I haven't been to your class in 3 times. No. Let me hear it, right? Let me hear what's going on. And then let me kind of put you in touch with this person on campus. And here's how we can work with you to make it work. And so it's not an automatic, oh, we're sorry. And so when you get it back together, come back to us. No, it's those relationships. And in that bachelor's program that I spoke about earlier, I even asked the individual who's running that program for us here, Mr. Nicholas Fault. I said, well, what are some of the things we've learned here, especially with regard to individuals who are coming back to get their baccalaureate degree? And over 50% of the individuals in that Bachelor's of Applied Liberal Studies program are adult learners. And here's what he said, and this is sort of in line with your question. He said, yes, we are finding amongst the adult learners, the Black adult learners who are coming back to get the baccalaureate degree, yes, one compelling reason is to make sure that they have the skill set that employers are looking for, and now a graduate with this interdisciplinary focus. But, who knows, over 50% of the reasoning there is deeply personal. It's deeply personal. This is something I started. I promised my mother I would do this. I promised my grandfather I would do this. And so that's what many of our students here do. They're first generation college going students. We have the network in place to make sure that we are listening to them and we are working with them. And so um, what what I would say to potential Black adult learners is that you want to come to a place like Morgan because we understand your struggle, we understand your tenacity, and we understand how to ensure that your resilience is even hardened, and you're going to make it across the finish line here and get what perhaps you have not experienced before, a college degree.
Love that. Understand the struggle, the tenacity, and your resilience. Very, very important. And, great insight as well. So we were just talking about, students, the Black adult learner. Now I want to shift to thinking about HBCU leadership, HBCU senior leadership, your fellow HBCU presidents. We've got a good amount of folks watching today from various HBCUs around the country, and our chat box has been active in folks asking questions and sharing resources. And so I wanted to ask you if there are people at other HBCUs that are wanting to both attract and re-engage and serve Black adults over the age of 25. What are a few pieces of advice that you would give them?
Mm-hmm. I think the first is you have to be candid with your own faculty. Our institutions are deeply rooted in traditional ways of viewing academic performance. And I understand that because our culture was one where the thinking was that if you went to a Black college, you had to be 2 times better than someone else. And so that whole culture was, oh wow, it was just built on on rigor in the way in which they think about it. And so I think a great conversation early on with your faculty is very important to get them to understand that this body of work that you're about to undertake as an institution is not about dumbing down your curriculum or in any way reducing your academic rigor. It's just a different way of meeting people where they are and ensuring they have the tools needed at certain points in their lives to be successful. That's number one. Number two, flexibility matters. And so within the HBCU world, we still are kind of rooted, many of us, in this very, very traditional way of offering courses. It's Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we don't do a very good job of weekend, online, synchronous, asynchronous. And so if we're serious about going after this market, I mean, we really do have to embrace flexibility in the modality in which we are offering these courses. And so if an adult learner is working from 8 a.m., and many of them are, until 6 p.m. every single day, then what makes you think that they can just kind of stop at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and take a course? And so you got to kind of really understand the population and structure your modality to speak to the population, not based on when you are available as an institution. And then the last, of course, is once again the relationships. Um, that is so critical. And I won't repeat why, because I've said that before. And then that coupled with your really understanding the regional economy uh, and um, and how this population from 25 to 49 or so, that's the growth population in the United States that we need to target for college attendance, because the 18 to 22-year-old population is decreasing nationally. And then when you look at the percent of Blacks with a high quality credential beyond high school, it is lagging significantly behind whites in this space. And so the only way for Blacks to catch up with whites with regard to educational attainment at the post high school level is for our HBCUs to begin to think very differently about who else we can serve. Jasmine, one last piece here, because once again, and I really understand this piece, and I have, I'm sure, many of my colleagues on the line who are just absolutely incredible, provost and vice president for enrollment management, student success, and all of her colleagues, deans, et cetera. Um, we, in my view, I think we pay too much attention at HBCUs to what I call rankings that really aren't about effective educational outcomes. You know, they're about so-called prestige that someone else has kind of said to us. Well, here's the way you need to kind of think about whether you are number one and you are number five or you are number seven, right? And I don't buy into that really at all, you know, because it's very, very difficult to rank Morgan, if you will, versus Harvard. And I know, you know, I have 2 degrees from Harvard, and so it's just ludicrous, right? But who says that Harvard is better than Morgan? Well, I would debate that on any platform. And so we, I think, have to really kind of understand, if you will, that going into a market like this is not one that is detrimental to our brand. Quite the contrary. I mean, you look at Purdue and you look at Arizona State and you look at NYU and you look at the University of Wisconsin and you look at all these Penn State, these big systems that have been in this space for years. It's not about brand reduction, it's about brand enhancement all over the world. So I think we have some catching up to do in this space with the larger genre of American higher education.
I love that. It's about brand enhancement, not about dumbing down your curriculum. The modality matters, the flexibility matters, all extremely important points to think about. And I want to highlight something you mentioned on the 18 to 24 population actually decreasing. Not many realize that. And so that places even more of an emphasis on the need to think about serving students that are over the age of 25 that are juggling lots of responsibilities in their lives. I want to encourage folks to continue to share questions in the chat. We are now going to dive into our Q&A portion of this session. And so we've got a few questions already lined up, but please do continue to share in the chat and also share on social media using the hashtag Lumina HBCU ALI. Okay, so I will start off, let's see, with a question someone had about challenges in re-engaging Black adults. They are wondering if, in your opinion, if you think one of the biggest challenges is the degree audit once you have re-engaged an adult learner before they've re-enrolled. If you think the degree audit is one of the biggest challenges in serving this population, or are there other more pressing challenges in your experience?
Yes, I do think the degree audit is a challenge, though perhaps not from the perspective that the questioner is asking. Number one, I do think that because many in this space will have swirled and they may have transcripts pending from 4 or 5 places, it's perhaps very difficult for them to get those official transcripts because they still owe that institution or that institution has placed them in collections. And so, therefore, the challenge is if someone is wanting to enter one of the programs, and the institution or 2 or 3 institutions that they attended won't release their official transcripts because they still owe money, how do you assess the authenticity of those courses offered? And that's something that, as we build out our model here at Morgan, we will certainly keep in front of us. The other is that the state of Maryland, or several years ago, through state regulations, opened up the statutes here where any institution can accept up to 90 credits, transfer credits. And the online institution here in the state of Maryland, they have been doing it for a while, I think over the last 7 or 8 years. And so the degree audit here is giving us some flexibility where we can accept up to 90 credits for this 120 credit baccalaureate degree, number one. Number two, we're also building out our model where we will have expertise in credit for prior learning. And so if you have a student who's coming and they want a degree in business, engineering, and X, and they are working in accounting at a local firm, and they've been working there for 12 years, well, we can go and we can look at what type of skills have been acquired in that environment that actually could be equivalent to accounting 201 or accounting 202, and therefore give them an additional 8 to 10 credits for prior learning. So ostensibly, a student coming into one of these interdisciplinary degree programs here, Morgan, remember, they have to transfer in a minimum of 60 credits, but they could transfer up to 90, and they could get an additional 20 credits for prior learning. They could actually get their baccalaureate degree here within 1 semester, no more than 1 year. And so the institution, once again, has to be flexible with systems. Yes, they're fine. You have to have people in place who are coming to the advising process with care. And you have to look at issues of pricing and how you can help these students satisfy some of their bills in previous places. For example, if you have the resources to do that through tuition discounting or some other kinds of mechanisms.
Yes, that's great. That's very important to think about. We've got a question about, actually, this question hints at what Dr. Alston was referring to in our first plenary session. Dr. Alston's one piece of advice she shared, she's a faculty member at NCANT, was that we need to go to them. We can't always expect them to come to us. And so she recommended things like, we need to engage in community-based centers. We need to use our public libraries and other spaces to engage and re-engage Black adult learners. So as you think about those different approaches, what are your thoughts on HBCUs engaging with community-based organizations to reach and to re-engage Black adults?
That's absolutely essential. It's absolutely essential. You're not going to reach this population just by running fancy ads, because there's a reason why they have not finished their degrees. And those ads are just can be coming across once again as just, we want you here for the number, you know. But when you go to those Black churches and you are sitting there and you have this information in the church bulletin, you have ahead of time work with the minister there, where during the course of announcements and there are sermonic messages, they're talking about the fact that Morgan State University has created this great opportunity for you to go back to school and get your degree, and here's how you can do it. Well, that is bringing, if you will, this kind of softness to this opportunity that won't come across in just kind of a fast ad or so. And then you can create these opportunities at the end of like a church service, where you have a couple of people from the university say, okay, we're going to be here in this breakout room in the back. We're going to, have more information for you, blah, blah. And so that's what we do here in Morgan. We are so community focused. And Baltimore is a city of neighborhoods structured in terms of community associations. And we spend a lot of time going to those association meetings, and certainly plan to do more of that with this particular strategy. But Dr. Austin was spot on, and I think her advice is advice that should be heeded by all.
Yes, thank you. And you've given me affirmation about the value and the potential that Black churches provide in re-engaging this population. I love what you were sharing, and I think that is a space that a lot of institutions have overlooked in engaging Black adults. We've got time for maybe one or two more questions. So someone's saying, talking about statistics that show that Black adults with college degrees earn around the same amounts as whites without those degrees. And so how do we overcome the disparities that lead to suppressed wages for Black individuals with post-secondary degrees?
So those of us in leadership positions, first of all, when we are given an opportunity to be on these boards, particularly, we can't just sit in the seat and be thankful that we are the first Black on the board. If, for example, that organization is not doing by all of its employees the same thing. And so the responsibility of leadership is critical. And this has to be addressed over a period of time. It's not episodic, it's a process. But it starts, or must start, at least in my case, and in the case of other presidents and others who are given the opportunity to serve on these governing boards. You have to look at compensation. You have to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And don't be afraid to call out these organizations if they're not doing the right thing. I do think as well that there has to be more advocacy at the level of state government, in the case of public institutions, and at the federal level, in terms of the wage administration and labor laws, to kind of look at these issues, and then once we kind of get a clear understanding of what the disparities are, I think we have to be very, very clear in our messaging, so we don't kind of over intellectualize it. We got to get out there and we have to really kind of educate individuals as to these disparities and these inequities around pay. And the only reason, perhaps sometimes, is the hue of one's skin. But Jasmine, it starts with leadership at whatever level that you have been imbued to provide that leadership, and don't take that lightly.
That is right. And you know what? That is such a gem that I am going to end there, because that was the perfect note to end on. Use your leadership wisely. Don't take it lightly, and make sure you speak up. I want to thank you, Dr. Wilson, for your time today and for all of the great insight that you shared with us. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. And my only regret is that I wish we had more time. But everyone has been singing your praises in the chat, and we are just so grateful for your service at Morgan State University and your service on our board as well. So now I am going to hand it over to our MC, Rashida Lopez Morgan, so that she can transition us into our second and final plenary session for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haywood.
Thank you, President Wilson and Dr. Haywood. President Wilson, your remarks are so meaningful and timely. I'm so excited about the work ahead and the impact the focus on re-engaging BIPOC adult learners, and particularly Black adult learners through HBCUs, will have on the field. Thank you again.
Good morning, everybody. I am very excited to introduce our next plenary session and to engage in an amazing conversation about the diversity and the distinction amongst Black adult student learners at HBCUs. We are joined today by Chip Rory, who is a current adult learner at Johnson C. Smith University, Dr. Relinda Thomas, who is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Assessment, and Programs at Fayetteville State University. Well, she will be giving us some tremendous insights into military adult student learners. Dr. Amelia Purnell, who is the Vice President for Research and Policy Student Affairs Administrators in Higher Education, NASFA, where she will be providing some experiences on rural adult learners through her own work and her own lived experiences as a rural student learner at an HBCU. And David Kroom, who is the Assistant Director for Post-Secondary Achievement and Innovation at Ascend at the Aspen Institute. Well, he will be providing some tremendous insights into parents who are adult learners at HBCUs. I'm so excited for this conversation, and welcome. So let's just jump right in. I think it would be good for us to set a tone about, diverse adult student populations at HBCUs, right? So when we think about Black adult student learners at HBCUs, they're often broadly depicted as merely, quote unquote, older students. However, what do you all believe HBCU communities need to know about the diversity within these populations? Who wants to go first? I can call on somebody.
Well, I'm happy to share this. At Fayetteville State University, we have a very diverse group of adult learners. Of course, we have those who are military affiliated. We have some who work in virtually every kind of work background. We have those who are working parents, those who are returning after being in the workforce for a long time. We have people who have a number of different needs. And so it's very useful to look at the diversity of them, that they are not a monolithic group.
Exactly.
Yeah, so for students who are parents, we know that 40% of Black women enrolled in post-secondary are mothers, and about 21% of Black men enrolled in post-secondary are fathers. So we're talking about a population that is fairly unique. I think that student parents are not just dealing with financial kind of capacity concerns, but also this idea of mutual motivation, that they're motivated by their children to be successful in these pathways, but then also experience this concept of time poverty. They have significantly less time, about half of the time they dedicate to their academic pursuits as compared to non-parents. And so we're talking about a population that, considering all of the financial and time constraints that they have, they still want to be successful and are trying to better themselves and their families.
Absolutely. If I can chime in and co-sign both with Dr. Thomas and Dr. Kroom, there's a diverse amount of people here. The population is incredible. There's so many different backgrounds, experiences, life changes, and so it's pretty incredible. And the community here is ridiculous. You have so many different backgrounds, and people, like he said, Dr. Kroon, still want to be successful, things that they haven't completed, things that they wanted to do. And they're not just doing it for them most of the time. There's a team of people on their back. And so, yeah, the culture and the diversity here is it's pretty incredible.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Chip.
So I feel like I should have to add something too, not to leave everybody else. There's so much they've already said. I think I would add one more thing, which is that if you imagine a classroom experience that's filled with learners who are in a particular discipline, I could imagine the contributions of an adult learner being exceptionally beneficial to the conversation, especially if you're thinking about the students who maybe are in their early 20s or just finishing high school. To have a teammate who's working on a group project and they're an adult learner and they've had some more professional experience in the field, or they have other life experiences, I think it enriches the overall experience for all students to have that type of diversity in thought. And I think adult learners bring that from their personal experience, their lived experience, and just navigating life. And so I think that's an overall positive contribution for the campus.
No, most definitely. Digging in even deeper, I'm going to ask Dr. Thomas a question. So Fayetteville State University is unique in many ways. Your student population is considerably heavy with regard to adult student learners. Fort Bragg is also a presence. What advice do you have for HBCUs who are seeking to engage current military stakeholders, veterans, and their families? Because it is a considerable presence in the city of Fayetteville.
Indeed, and thank you. 34% of our adult learners at Fayetteville State University are military affiliated. And based on our experience, we would recommend that institutions do the following: that communication is key to ensure that people feel valued. Develop regular outreach and contacts with the military community. There may be organizations on the base that you can connect with, groups that serve military spouses. At Fort Bragg, there's the Association of Bragg Spouses. You can make contacts with the Garrison Commander's Office. Here it's Colonel Scott Pence. And you may have a campus office of Veterans Affairs. Another thing we recommend, provide flexible scheduling and course delivery options. Military students can benefit from asynchronous online courses, not just online, but asynchronous online courses. We had a number of students who served in Afghanistan while they were taking classes. And you could have a student who literally just came off of patrol and then logs on to a class. And so asynchronous scheduling can be very helpful during a deployment. In addition, it's useful to provide an efficient transfer credit process. Fayetteville State University awards credit for military training based on documentation from their Joint Services Transcript, the JST, and also the Community College of the Air Force, the CCAF. And so to help students with identifying credits, the American Council on Education, ACE, the American Council on Education, offers an online tool called the ACE Military Guide. And the great thing about this is that not only can it help you connect military training with appropriate course competencies, it also is free. Let me say that again, it's actually free and available to institutions. And what's different about this is that oftentimes when you use an online tool, there's a subscription price, and that subscription price rises for the institution the more people that you have using it. In the case of the ACE Military Guide, you can add on as many people as you want. And so you can have advisors who are trained to use it, faculty members who are trained to use it. And so it's a great tool to be able to help military students or prospective students connect credits or potential their military training to appropriate college credits. So that's something that can be useful. Again, that's the ACE Military Guide.
No.
So along with that, certainly you want to train advisors who are well versed in Veterans Affairs and the transfer credit process. Our Office of Adult Learners is fortunate to be staffed with an adult learner who is military retired, and she's currently developing a military resource guide for our adult learners.
Wow. Like, that is a lot. That was good. That was good. That was good. Fayetteville State is definitely leading the way with regard to servicing military students and their families. I'm gonna move on really quickly to think about the rural student experience. I was thinking about my own experience. I'm a proud Howard University, alumni. I literally lived down the street from, my campus. So I was raised in DC. Marion Barry was mayor. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time. But when you're thinking about our, rural students, Dr. Pinnell, what is important for HBCUs to think about in regards to their students that are from rural areas or that are still living in rural communities?
Dr. Mobley, I hope it's okay for me to speak from personal experience here.
Of course.
Both being a graduate of my favorite HBCU, Florida A&M University, and growing up in a rural environment in Lake City, Florida, I can say for sure that this is very personal to me. And I think some of the things that I would highlight for rural students who are still in rural environments and going to college are that they have a lot of assets that can really be transferable skills for when they get to college. So I want to focus on the positive and three things specifically. The first is planning. And so when you think about it, students who may be going to town, what they would refer to as the city, they have to plan. And so one trip to the store is not usually just a trip to the store. It's a trip to the store and to the post office and maybe to the pharmacy and a couple other places. So this kind of inherent ability to plan well and plan ahead is a good thing. I think that only helps when you're in college. The second is risk management. So the idea that living in a rural environment, there may be inclement weather, the power may go out. You have to have backup plans. And so being able to anticipate what risks might come can also help you when you're in college, obviously. And then the third is this sense of community. And I feel like from a personal standpoint, living so far away from others, the people that are near you in your neighborhood, you get to know them, you get to know their personal stories, you learn how to share with them and just really experience things together. And so I think going to college and being a part of a campus community is essential. And these three assets are things that you learn just from growing up in the country, and they can help you when you get to college.
No, definitely. I think that sometimes we forget that many of our HBCUs are located in rural communities. And even navigating that space and what does that even mean when you're thinking about this particular student population is very important to consider. It really, really is. Okay, David Kroom, based on the work that you do at Ascend, how are HBCUs uniquely positioned to serve student parents? Let's talk about that demographic.
Love to. I also love when Amelia also goes off about FAM, because growing up in Florida, I was surrounded by my favorite aunt who went to FAM, and also several who went to Florida Memorial. So just surrounded by that. Anyway,
we're good people.
They're great. They're great. So something that's this work is also personal to me too. I'm the son of a student parent, so my mom went back and got her community college credential and her bachelor's and master's degree when I was elementary and middle school. So I've seen the benefits in going back to school and what it does in order to help serve our family. Something that I think is really interesting and kind of comes up in this work, not just at HBCUs, but across the post-secondary system, is there's a stigma associated with being a parent within these institutions, right? So these parents are needing to be served. They're adult learners. They may have once gone to a for-profit college and then decided to go to an HBCU or a community college. This is not their first instance in post-secondary. And so something that we see throughout our surveys, not just ours, but Generation Hope and Hope Center and others, is that there's a stigma associated with being a student parent. And it really is important for institutions of higher education to remove that stigma. Talking to an HBCU in North Carolina that we've been engaging with in our work, something else that kind of came that they shared, which I hadn't even fully considered, is the history of HBCUs being rooted in the church, right? And that in past decades, if you were pregnant or parenting and you shared that information, you might have been removed from that institution, right? And so there's a history there that needs to be, I think, kind of dealt with and really considered. And I think that now I'm excited to see the work that is happening across the systems within HBCUs and others to really think about how to support student parents within these contexts. Student parents are looking for additional support. So this HBCU I was talking about actually had childcare availability on their campuses, and that's something that's really important. Helping we know from research from IWPR, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, that that childcare costs well exceeds the cost of public in-state tuition in over 40 states. And so childcare is extremely important, but very expensive provision for student parents. It's not just about childcare, though. We also know that case management and advising is really important. I love that President Wilson brought up the kind of history of HBCUs being, really intrusive, right, in terms of care and community. And I think that's something that's important for student parents, right, that there's a lot of decisions to be made within these their post-secondary journeys, and they need the supports in order to help make those critical decisions, because again, they have very limited time to dedicate to their academic pursuits, because many of them are working full-time while being potentially enrolled full-time or part-time in college. We have a lot of single mothers who are enrolled in these spaces, so they're taking on the entirety of the childcare for the most part, with some of the community surrounding them. So I think it's about how can HBCUs and colleges be that community and be that network to help student parents really feel supported throughout their post-secondary journey. So I'm really excited to hear Chip, as a student father, share more about his experience at Johnson C. Smith. So thank you.
No, most definitely. And that was a really good segue to ask Chip about his experiences, because I remember listening to a panel one day that Dr. Purnell was actually on, and she made the magnificent statement of saying, when students come to HBCUs, we do not arrive alone. We're literally carrying our entire families and communities and generations before us when we get onto these campuses. So it's a family that comes, and you're becoming a part of a new family. But Chip, what has your experience and story been as an adult student learner at Johnson C. Smith University? What has it been like for you?
Well, I like to say that, like you said, it is a family event. I did bring a whole team of people with me. I am a first generation college student. My mom, my dad, they never went. My brother probably never would go, and my sister just didn't feel like it was for her. So coming to JCSU, coming in and getting advised by the advisor, I was vetted basically and asked, what are you trying to do? What do you want to do? And that's been the consistent question. What are you trying to do? Even as early as 3 weeks ago, I was asked by, the administration here, what are you trying to do with your degree? What are you going to do? So I got vetted. And then when we get here the first week, it was a family. It's always felt like family. It was never just welcome. It was welcome back, welcome home. You're here. The Metropolitan Dean of Students and the Assistant Dean of Students, they go around to every class, first week, first day, and they're putting a face with a name and an email. So you know exactly who is over you. You know exactly who's the advisor and the administration, and you always feel like you can go to them because now you've got a face to that person. So they let you know that we're here and we're here for you. And when they see you on campus, they speak and they're coming to you, and they recognize maybe not a name, but they see your face, and because there's so much in your face, they know when you're not right, when you speak, but it's just, what's wrong with you today? It was always that. Let me pull up, come into my office, sit down, let me talk to you real quick to get you back on track. It's always never about, a number or retention rate or, that type of deal that I know is important, forecasting for the next year, but the experience has been incredible. We come to Johnson C. Smith or back to school to achieve something, and we pull the whole family. A lot of people will say that, I had a professor once, and this is like, to me at the time it was a negative experience, I thought, but what I understood what she was trying to do, because no matter what you think about yourself, people can see things in you that you don't see for yourself. So it was a writing class, and I had to write this paper, and I wrote like I thought I was Toni Morrison. I thought I put it down basically. And she was like, okay, and I got my grade back, and it was a B, and I'm like, whoa. So I emailed her, and she was like, yeah, no, you get the B. And I wasn't okay with that. I was, wow, this is not good. So I said, we need to have a face-to-face conversation after class. And so she pulled me to the side and she said, yeah, what is it? And I said, well, I know I wrote an A paper, like A plus actually. And she said, you know what? Mr. Rory, you're intelligent and you write very well, and I can a lot of times just sit back and just let you, give advisement on some of the things." She said, "But you, there's more in you. There's more in you. You've been told by family and friends that you're this golden child. Like they come to you for a lot of information, so on and so forth." So she said, "Man, I know you have more in you than what you're giving." She said, "So you wrote a great paper, but it's still a B paper. And that's what you're going to get." I said, "So you're not going to change the grade?" She said, "No." And I had to deal with that. But it got me to look inside myself to bring something more out. There's plenty of diamonds walking around campus, plenty of diamonds, and that pressure has to be applied to them, to bring that out. And, that experience with that, not just that professor, but, just all around the administrator from the top down, it has to start at the top. And if they push us, it's a tumble effect. It'll start to seep and we start to grow and shine. So that's really my experience. It's been an excellent one so far, and I'm looking forward to walking across that stage here next year.
No, I love hearing that because, as the old adage goes, iron sharpens iron. And I was thinking about an episode of the Cosby Show when Claire Huxtable sitting around her friends talk about a professor, and the professor was like, dig deeper. So I imagine that your professor was like, dig deeper, and we're going to see what happens with that. Okay, let's take it back out to another kind of like macro level view in a way. And this is a question for all the panelists. As HBCU communities, what should our institutions consider and be cognizant of when strategizing how to engage diverse adult student learning populations? Because this is not a one-size-fits-all model. We have parents, we have service people, we have rural students, we have so many types of students that are coming that are part of this population. What should our schools be cognizant of when thinking about the diversity within this community?
I believe meeting everybody where they are, recognizing the potential in that person, wherever they are, meet them where they are and hone into that, and then try to expound on that. We are, like it's been said, we're juggling a million different things. We did come with planning. We weren't planners. Maybe we weren't planners back, when we were younger, trying to go to school. But here now we have to juggle, the bills. We have to juggle bills, work, going to church, all these different things. So we're a little bit better in managing things now. But now some of us haven't opened books in 20 years, 25 years. So we have to relearn how to read, how to think, how to retain information, how to write down things. So it's a plethora of things that we have to relearn. And if you meet that person where they are, recognizing what they could be, it helps a great deal. It helps a tremendous amount.
No, thank you for that, Chip.
Yeah, I love what Chip just said. In the work that I do at Ascend, we engage several student parents as kind of advisors toward our effort. And it's amazing to me because they have such clarity of purpose. So they know exactly what they want to do. Like they pretty much know what degree or credential they want to do or what career they're trying to get to. This is not the student that's straight from high school who's still, trying to experiment and figure out kind of what their life's going to be. Like I feel like the parents that I've been working with, they just have really strong intention and they just need the support in order to get to that path. So it's like they have this really clear kind of view of what they need to do. And they also have a past too, right? Like, as I mentioned, many of them have attempted to do post-secondary in many different ways. And unfortunately, our systems are not set up to support them. And so I think being really intentional about understanding kind of their past connection to post-secondary and their past journey, but then also recognizing that they already have really clear purpose. and don't necessarily need as much of the, in many cases, don't need as much of the sort of those sorts of supports. They really just need kind of like, what classes do I need to take? How can I get to this credential? Because like I have a lot to do right now, and so just being really clear about what courses to take, when can I take them, having those flexible offerings, as was mentioned many times here, having access to federal, but also institutional aid to and support of them, I think is really important. I think I've heard mentioned too that there's not, and I've heard this from them too, there's not a lot of scholarship or resources that they feel can support them, and having access to that cash and to the money that they can do. Because I think that's another thing that's really different too about this population is that if you give them the resources, the money, they will use the resources correctly, right? Like you don't need to attach as much of the strings around this, which is what we do in higher education, right? Give them the money and they will figure out exactly how to utilize those resources to be effective, right? So I think that's something that's really important in this work.
And I would add one more thing specific to this college experience and what an adult learner would get from it, and the emphasis on transferable skills and the fact that they're learning everywhere. I think the more a college can do to help that adult learner see that, hey, they're already bringing skills and competencies to their college experience. And then when they are in college, they're picking up even more. And then when they leave, they'll have even more than that. And so helping them really just curate and narrate their learning journey. And it starts from the day that they take their first class and it goes until they finish. And so there are all types of tools and exercises that advisors can use. But I think a steady and consistent message to that adult learner and any student really that learning is happening everywhere and they're already coming with valuable skill sets. And so to that extent, I think they'll see their college experience as one step toward a longer career, one that they may have started at a later time, but it's ongoing. And anytime they're in a classroom or outside the classroom, they're learning things. And I think that has to show that value, because when it gets to be really difficult and you're juggling all those responsibilities that David and Chip and others have described, you need to know, is it going to be worth it? And what's the overall value? And so I'd like to suggest that learning happens every single day. And the more we can emphasize that with them and help them see it and coach them and help them tell their story, I think they'll be better served for it.
And I fully agree with what our colleagues have said. To build upon that, we want to take certainly a holistic approach to supporting our adult learners, that we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to not only support them, but to help remove any barriers that might be in their way. And so, for instance, if we have policies that could be more efficiently implemented, especially transfer credit policies, or better advising that we might be able to provide that's more efficient, if we're able to help them with academic support, for instance, because many of them are coming in after years being away from the classroom. We may have students who are experiencing, and this is something that we can say about students nationally, that 1/3 of students across all backgrounds have reported experiencing food insecurity, for instance. And so what can we do to help address that? What can we do to help address the needs of working parents who need to find affordable health care that also coincides with their work and their school schedule? That's a heavy lift. And so what can we do to provide support to them and help remove barriers that might be in the way of their matriculation?
No, this was all very good. Like I'm just excited even to continue the conversation even further. Okay, when we're thinking about adult student learners, and I'm going to direct this to you, Dr. Thomas, what is foremost and most needed to support military learners and their families as they engage HBC communities from recruitment, during matriculation, and even after graduation?
Oh, fantastic. Amelia and David already mentioned community. And certainly the most important thing is to create a welcoming and supportive atmosphere for military affiliated students. In many cases, people who are stationed at a base have been supplanted from their homes across the country. They're removed from their community of support. And in my experience, living and working in a military community and having friends among that community, they can have a perception that they are separate from the community, that they are there, but they don't feel that they're a part of the community. They don't feel seen, that the community sees them. And so this can extend to the colleges that they attend, and giving them a sense that they are welcome, that they belong, cannot be overstated. Training advisors who are well versed in military affairs providing advising that's tailored to their unique needs, and having, in many cases, student ambassadors. We have a lot of students who are military affiliated on our campus. Student ambassadors who are military affiliated can also help students feel welcome and supported. It's also useful to provide mental health counseling services or put them in touch with the available resources. This is important for college students generally, but we've seen, of course, a rise in students reporting depression and suicidal ideation even before the pandemic. Military affiliated students can experience these challenges at an even higher rate than the general population. So it's important to provide mental health support or to get them in touch with those resources if it's needed. Establish an ongoing team that's dedicated to adult learners, including military affiliated students. Make it a priority. We have a great team at Fayetteville State University, the Adult Learner Steering Committee, and that includes leaders across academic affairs and student affairs. A team approach that includes the Office of the Provost, admissions, advising, financial aid, institutional research, our Office of Adult Learners, the Office of Faculty Development, and other stakeholders helps us to make data-driven decisions that hopefully can meet adult learners' unique needs. And of course, that includes our military learners. Marketing and imagery matters. Do your adult learners, whether they're military affiliated or not, do they see themselves in your online presence, in your flyers, or in your marketing on television? Think of every college movie we've ever seen, that often focuses on the imagery of the 18 to 24-year-olds. Do your adult learners see themselves at least in part, in your advertisements? And so we want to make sure that in every way that we walk the talk to make all of our students feel welcome and valued, that they belong, that your institution is committed to their success.
Excellent advice. I will tell y'all, if you ever visit the city of Fayetteville, as soon as you get off the airplane, there are huge billboards in the airport that feature their military student learners and their families. If you drive around that town, there are billboards. If you watch the television, it's definitely happening at Fayetteville. They are doing it, and they are doing it very, 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 very well. I feel like the witching hour is coming amongst us. Okay, we have like 5 minutes left. So as we wrap up, what are some final thoughts or perspectives that you all have with regard to HBCUs that are seeking to pursue their adult learners, or they're wanting them to return back to their campuses? What do you think that we need to leave the conversation with? I'm going to start with Chip with this, because you have a very interesting story of how you began and you returned back to your campus and even what you're engaging in now.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I guess for me, what I've heard from everyone is that, it's relationship, acknowledgement of, who the student is, what they desire, becoming to an HBCU, and always, paying attention to that thing. Mental health is everything, and making sure that we, pay attention to when a person is troubled or bothered or whatnot. It's important to feel a part of something. And here, there's maybe some things that I couldn't partake in when I was younger, but to know that I could still even try to be a part of that is everything. And just like student government, I may wanted to be a part of that. I know that I can still do that. Feeling that I could still be a part of everything that I didn't get before. And then that's what a lot of students or adult learners are trying to do. They still want to be a part, still want to feel like they're part of the main campus and not just something to the side. And I think here at Johnson C. Smith, they have so many different programs, meeting students where they are. Like I say, social media campaigns that they have implemented to reach out to those, because a lot of people don't know about an email or don't also always respond to an email, but social media they're on Twitter, they're on the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Snapchats and things of that nature. So programs like that are implemented here at Johnson T. Smith are important. But always making the student feel like they are part of the whole big picture of Johnson T. Smith or a historically Black college, period, is everything to a student.
No,
decides to come.
Definitely, Chip. I'm gonna have to nominate you for SGA president now.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Hey, I would take on that too.
All right.
Yeah, I think the last point I would make is that these populations, adult learner populations, are so intersectional. I've seen research that said that veteran students, over half of them are parents, right? So we're talking about many of the same kind of populations. We're talking about, in the case of student parents, a majority first generation population, one that experiences food and housing insecurity at higher rates than non-parents. These are populations that HBCUs are meant to serve, right? And so this is something that I think that there's so much, and President Wilson spoke to this earlier, that the traditional age group is declining in terms of enrollment, and there's enrollment growth potentially with adult learners. But we've also seen, at least in the case of student parents, that the pandemic was really wrought with peril for them, and many of them considered stopping out because of the caregiving aspect. And that was some research that came from Lumina and also the Gallup. And so these are institutions, these are individuals, students who are like looking for community, for support to keep them enrolled and keep them toward their eventual dream of getting this post-secondary credential. And so there's just so much potential that HBCUs and these students have for HBCUs. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity in general with Lumina, really seeing this population as one that's sought after, not one that is kind of just behind the scenes or something that, you just kind of like lackluster, but something that is a population that's truly sought after for enrollment, I think is something that's really great here. So thank you.
And I would just add one more thing that makes HBCUs and many other campuses special, homecoming, and specifically the community around homecoming. But I'm thinking about one additional angle. It's when someone graduates from an HBCU, they love to talk about it. They love to tell everybody about why they love their HBCU experience. But I think there's an opportunity there for HBCUs who have adult learner graduates and adult learner alumni to come back and give back to the college and make some partnerships and pair up some current adult learners with some graduate adult learners who had the same experience. And so I know it seems like a very micro, very specific, very tangible thing, but I think it makes a huge difference so that when homecoming comes around, you feel even more like a part of the community. I would love to see us do more of that stuff. And I think the second thing is one of the most special moments, I think, for any college student is when you get your college ID card. And it's a quick moment. You take the picture, but you see your name attached to that school and it changes your life. Your identity changes and it just feels really special. So I don't know if that could be celebrated more. That would be my second suggestion.
Okay.
And I fully agree. Anything that we can do to help support our students, to help build that sense of community, to help remove barriers. We have, of course, historically, not just in this time period, but historically, HBCUs have served a population that often is at statistical greater risk of certain challenges, whether it is economic challenges, or if it's challenges in the workplace, if it's having to go to school while you are working a job and have children. And so or coming from, in some cases, under-resourced school systems. And so there are a number of things that we have to address, whether it's academic support, whether it's different financial supports that may be needed, and of course the need to help remove barriers and to help them help them navigate the process as they matriculate, because for many people it's an unfamiliar process. And so all of those things that we can do to help create support and help them to know and believe that we believe in them and that they can be successful at your institution.
No, definitely. Thank you all for your participation and your tremendous insights into what the many different faces of HBCU adult student learners look like. I think that right now we're experiencing, I've been blessed at least to see another HBCU renaissance that is occurring. But HBCUs have been doing this work since their foundings. They will continue to do this work. And I'm just excited to see what will come from this. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Mobley, and thank you to our panelists from our second plenary session. What a great conversation we have had this morning between the plenary session on contemporary and historical contributions of HBCUs to our keynote chat with Dr. Wilson of Morgan State University, and rounding it out with this last plenary on the diversity within historically Black colleges and universities. And so important, as David Kroom mentioned, to keep in mind that Black adult learners are not a monolith, and there are many different intersectional identities within that population of students that we want to think about as we engage them and as we serve them. Well, Twitter has been lighting up with all of you sharing your thoughts and feedback with the hashtag Lumina HBCUALI. Please continue to share on social media. We will continue to do so at the conclusion of this convening, and we will share out recordings as well for those of you that have registered for this convening. So prior to this plenary session, we asked you all if you would help us create a word cloud and share one word that embodies or represents our nation's HBCUs. And so over the course of the past 40 minutes or so, you all have put your words in, and we have created a beautiful word cloud that we would like to share with you all as we conclude this event. And so as we bring this image up, you will see how powerful this word cloud is in really embodying all that HBCUs have to offer, not just their students, but they have to offer post-secondary education overall. And you can see some of the prominent words there are resilient, which is also what Dr. Wilson mentioned in his conversation. We've got community, which was another big theme throughout both plenary sessions, and thinking about the assets that HBCUs that they provide to their students, empowering, family, dream makers. And so many wonderful words that describe our HBCU communities and institutions. And so thank you all that contributed to this wonderful word cloud. And we will be sure to share it out on social media as well from our Lumina Foundation Twitter account. And so this concludes our convening. I want to thank everyone that worked alongside of us to make this possible. Our convenings team, my colleague Zainab Okolo, Hager Sharp, and all of the team there. We are so appreciative. And most of all, Rashida Lopez Morgan from Education First, who was our MC for the day, who did a fabulous job in transitioning us through our sessions. I want to thank all of you attendees for being so engaging in the chat and on social media. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with us at the end of the event. Thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.